The Earth today is home to more than 8 billion people, a number that has steadily grown for centuries. Every year we see reports of overpopulation, resource shortages, and concerns about the planet's ability to sustain this many humans. But what if the opposite were to happen? What if, rather than growing, the global population declined dramatically, by a staggering 40%? That would reduce the number of people on Earth to just under 5 billion. Such a shift would not only be unprecedented in modern history, but would also ripple through every aspect of life, from economics and society to culture, politics, and the environment. Let's explore what a 40% population drop might look like, and what such a future would mean for humanity. A sudden or gradual drop of this magnitude could stem from a wide variety of causes. It could be the result of a massive global pandemic, one deadlier and more widespread than any we've ever seen before. It might occur due to a combination of falling birth rates and aging populations, which we are already beginning to observe in countries like Japan, South Korea, and parts of Europe. It could even result from environmental catastrophe or geopolitical collapse, leading to widespread mortality. Regardless of the trigger, a drop in global population of this scale would reshape the world in ways that are both predictable and unimaginable. Economically, a 40% drop in population would create immense instability, particularly in countries that are heavily dependent on labor-intensive industries. Nations like India, China, Indonesia, and Nigeria, which have large youthful populations driving their growth, could find their economies grinding to a halt. A dramatic reduction in the working-age population would disrupt supply chains, reduce productivity, and limit innovation. There would be fewer consumers, leading to a massive contraction in demand for goods and services. Businesses that depend on scale, like tech, manufacturing, and retail, would struggle to survive. Small and medium-sized enterprises might vanish altogether as customer bases shrink and operating costs rise per capita. A smaller labor pool would also mean employers would have to compete harder to attract workers. This could lead to higher wages in some sectors, but also force businesses to adopt more automation to make up for the lack of human labor. We might witness an acceleration in the development and deployment of artificial intelligence, robotics, and other labor-saving technologies, simply because there would be no other option. Ironically, some of the technologies developed to handle overpopulation might find renewed purpose in an underpopulated world. However, not every consequence would be negative. For instance, housing markets in many urban centers could stabilize or even see price drops. With fewer people competing for real estate, the affordability crisis plaguing major cities might ease. Public transportation systems, schools, and hospitals could also benefit from reduced pressure. Commutes would be shorter, classrooms less crowded, and waiting times at hospitals could decrease significantly. The quality of life in some areas might actually improve for those who remain. But the economic damage would also extend into public finance. With fewer workers paying taxes, governments would struggle to maintain public services. Pension systems and social security networks, already strained in aging societies, would teeter on the edge of collapse. Healthcare systems would be overwhelmed, not by patient numbers, but by the difficulty of finding enough professionals to staff them. Now, essential services like police, fire departments, and sanitation could experience dangerous underfunding or workforce shortages, particularly in rural or aging regions. Socially, the effects of a population decline could vary by country, region, and community. In many cultures, family and community life are centered around children and youth. A world with 40% fewer people would almost certainly include a much smaller, younger generation. Many schools might close due to a lack of students. Entire neighborhoods or towns could become abandoned, particularly in areas that already struggle with depopulation. In Japan today, ghost villages have already emerged in some regions. This phenomenon could become global. Culturally, we might see a resurgence in efforts to preserve languages, traditions, and histories that are threatened by demographic decline. With fewer people, each individual might feel a greater sense of responsibility to maintain their cultural heritage. Conversely, globalization might accelerate as people migrate and mix to fill demographic gaps in different parts of the world. Cities that were once culturally homogeneous may become more diverse out of necessity rather than preference. In terms of geopolitics, countries with shrinking populations might face strategic disadvantages. Military strength is often tied to population size. Nations that cannot maintain troop levels may find themselves vulnerable, or they might increasingly turn to drones and AI-driven weapons to compensate. Global power dynamics could shift dramatically. For example, if the US and China both saw major population reductions, emerging powers like Brazil or Nigeria, if they retain a relatively younger and larger population, could rise to fill the vacuum. Immigration policy could become a defining issue of the century, not as a defensive measure but as a national survival strategy. Environmental consequences of such a population drop are perhaps the most interesting. Fewer people would naturally mean less pressure on the Earth's ecosystems. Greenhouse gas emissions would likely fall. Deforestation might slow. Wildlife could begin to reclaim previously urbanized spaces. Overfished oceans might recover. Clean water could become more available, and air quality in major cities could significantly improve. Climate change, while not reversed, might slow down, giving humanity more time to implement sustainable solutions. The environmental rebound might be one of the few undeniable benefits of population decline. Yet, this comes with a caveat. A reduction in population does not automatically guarantee sustainable behavior. It is entirely possible that per capita consumption could rise, especially among wealthier societies that remain intact. If fewer people each consume more, the environmental benefit could be neutralized. Moreover, with fewer workers available, the green transition, building wind farms, solar panels, and electric transportation infrastructure, could be delayed or under-resourced. Paradoxically, the same decline that helps reduce emissions could also hinder our ability to create a sustainable future. The psychological effects of a massive population decline would also be profound. People are inherently social creatures. Communities would shrink. Family trees would thin out. The sense of isolation could increase, particularly for the elderly. Depression, loneliness, and mental health issues might rise as support networks dwindle. Governments and health systems might struggle to provide psychological care on a mass scale, especially as budgets shrink with declining tax revenues. The very fabric of society, already stretched in many parts of the world, could begin to unravel if people feel abandoned or hopeless about the future. Educational systems might see a renaissance or collapse, depending on how nations respond. On the one hand, with fewer students, the quality of education per individual could improve. Smaller class sizes, more individual attention, and personalized learning could become the norm. On the other hand, some schools may no longer be economically viable and may shut down, especially in rural areas. Entire school districts might consolidate or disappear. A declining student population could also lead to layoffs among teachers and academic professionals, reducing innovation in education systems. In terms of religion and ideology, lower populations could either radicalize or soften belief systems. Some groups might see the population decline as a divine punishment, or a sign of the end times, leading to spiritual revivals or fundamentalist movements. Others might take a more humanistic view and focus on improving the quality of life for those who remain. The philosophical and ethical questions that would arise, like who gets to have children or how to support aging populations, could ignite heated debates and cultural shifts. Technological innovation might speed up or slow down. With fewer minds at work, the pace of discovery could decline. Fewer students mean fewer future scientists, fewer researchers, and fewer entrepreneurs. But the urgency of replacing human labor with machines might also spark a new golden age of invention. Industries like biotechnology, AI, robotics, and nanotechnology could become even more critical. The very nature of what it means to be human and productive could be redefined in a world that needs fewer but more efficient people. Migration patterns would change drastically. Regions that retain youthful populations might become global hubs, attracting talent and investment. Countries facing dramatic declines may open their borders and offer citizenship incentives to attract immigrants, reversing decades of isolationist policies. the cultural and ethnic makeup of nations could shift significantly, creating new identities and challenges to national cohesion. Urban planning would need to adapt quickly. Cities designed for millions might suddenly be home to hundreds of thousands. Skyscrapers could remain dark. Suburbs might be reclaimed by nature. Municipal budgets would face enormous strain as tax bases shrink. Infrastructure like bridges, roads, and sewage systems could fall into disrepair due to lack of maintenance and personnel. Or, conversely, cities might become more livable and spacious, providing an unexpected quality of life boost for those who remain. On a global scale, cooperation might improve or collapse. With fewer people, the competition for resources might decline, reducing international tensions. Alternatively, resource-rich but population-poor countries might become targets of conquest by more desperate or aggressive nations. International institutions like the UN might need to be overhauled to reflect new realities. Voting systems based on population weight could become obsolete, forcing a shift toward new models of governance and diplomacy. Ultimately, a 40% drop in the global population would usher in a period of radical transformation. Every system, economic, social, environmental, political, and cultural, would be forced to adapt. The resilience of human civilization would be tested like never before. Such a future, while challenging, is not necessarily dystopian. It could offer an opportunity to rethink how we live, how we share resources, and how we care for one another. But only if we prepare wisely, act compassionately, and prioritize collective well-being over short-term gain. As we look ahead, one thing becomes clear. Humanity's greatest strength has always been its adaptability. Whether facing growth or decline, our future will depend on our willingness to change with the times, innovate boldly, and never lose sight of our shared humanity.